What began as a routine nighttime walk quickly turned into a nightmare when a young woman found herself trapped with no escape.
They look relaxed. They look like they're about to have fun. They look like it's going to be a good night that evening.
Her innocent life was tragically cut short, and the cold-blooded killer, having covered his tracks, fled.
She's got blood all over her. There's no response from her.
But thanks to the relentless work of detectives, the case was solved, revealing the truth about what happened to Adrianne Robert and exposing the person behind it all.
The frightening part is it could have happened to anyone.
Adrianne Robert and her boyfriend were getting ready to move into their first home together. From the moment Justin Pounders met her, he felt drawn to her like a magnet. The more he got to know Adrianne, the more he saw her warmth and vibrant spirit. She felt the same spark, and they quickly became inseparable ever since.
She's very beautiful, so she caught my eye really quick. Full life, just a happy person, someone you love to be around.
Just look above my...
At the time, Justin was sharing an apartment with a friend, but with their lease ending, the couple saw it as the perfect moment to find a place of their own and begin building a life together. Before moving out, Adrianne had been sharing a townhouse with her friend, Jay, so she decided to throw a sort of farewell party. They had no specific plans, just an evening to unwind and have some fun. But unfortunately, a third person joined their night. Later that night, Jay returned home alone, entirely unprepared for the shocking scene that awaited him. Unfortunately, it was too late. By the time help arrived, the paramedics could only confirm the young woman's death. She was discovered in the bathroom with a stab wound to her chest. The first thing I saw when I walked in was that there were no signs of forced entry. It was a 2-floor condominium, and the murder scene was right in the bathroom. A detective later explained, "There were no signs of forced entry, but a broken toilet seat and blood splattered on the wall suggested a violent struggle," quickly dismissing the theory of suicide. The fact that the victim was partially undressed led detectives to believe there may have been a sexual motive behind the attack. Bloodstains were found outside the bathroom as well. During their search of the house, the police uncovered something strange on the bed. Under the sheet was a 10 or 12-inch cutout. On top of her sheet, it appeared the criminal had tried to hide something on the bed, fearing it might reveal his identity, so he took the evidence with him. However, despite his caution, he was in a hurry and likely left behind a trace. A thorough examination of the bed revealed traces of male biological fluids, which were quickly sent to the lab for analysis. In addition, the police also discovered that Adrianne's orange Jeep was missing, and they were certain it had been taken by her attacker. As one group of detectives began searching for possible witnesses, another team delivered the heartbreaking news to the girl's family. The news came as a devastating shock to her loved ones. It felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under them. Adrianne had been the shining light of their family, and they couldn't comprehend why anyone would want to take such a bright, joyful person from their lives. Justin found out about the tragedy when he drove by his girlfriend's house that morning and saw police cars parked outside. Curious and concerned, he pulled over to find out what was going on. He never could have imagined the shocking news he was about to hear. In a matter of moments, what should have been one of the happiest days of his life was shattered into a horrifying nightmare. Soon after, investigators received a tip about the victim's car, which was found in a parking lot at a shopping center just a few blocks from Adrianne's home. The engine was still running, and the headlights were on, clear signs that the perpetrator had stolen the Jeep. Once the car was located, detectives turned their focus to finding any surveillance footage that could help identify the person behind the wheel. Narrowing their search to businesses with security cameras, the police requested footage from a large car dealership called CarMax, located just around the corner from where the car had been left. The CarMax security camera captured part of the parking lot just north of where Adrianne's car had been found. Around 3:30 a.m., the footage showed the silhouette of a man. Black male, baseball hat, long hair, and shorts. The unknown man was seen walking away from the area where the victim's car had been parked. To track his movements further, the police requested footage from a nearby store's camera. This was the moment where a clear shot could have been key to identifying the suspect. Unfortunately, the store's footage didn't offer any helpful details. At the same time, a local witness who lived near Adrianne shared some intriguing details. On the night of the attack, he saw something strange. Adrianne and an unfamiliar African-American man jogging down Wolford Road. The witness found this odd since neither of them was wearing workout clothes. In fact, Adrianne was in a dress, holding her shoes in her hands. The witness's statement helped clarify the bruises and injuries found on the victim's feet. Sadly, despite her apparent effort to escape, the attacker was able to follow her all the way home. Detectives brought Jay, Adrianne's roommate, in for questioning to get more details about their evening. The whole intention was, this was, the last hurrah for us as roommates together, Jay explained. She mentioned that they started by having a few shots at home before deciding to go out to a local strip club called Diamond Dolls for some fun. Did he specifically ask where she went, where she was going? I think he did. After talking to the club staff, investigators confirmed that both Jay and Adrianne had been at the club that night. This worked to their advantage since the club was equipped with numerous security cameras. The police now had a real opportunity to piece together what the friends had been doing throughout the night, who they interacted with, and when they went home. The parking lot security camera provided a wide-angle view, capturing everyone who entered the club. It didn't miss Jay and Adrianne's arrival. The footage shows them walking through the parking lot, and a few minutes later, at around 10:30 p.m., they are seen entering the club. They appear at ease, exactly how people do when they're planning to have a good time. At that point, the club wasn't busy, and the quality of the footage was clear enough for investigators to easily identify them. Jay claimed he left the club around 2:30 a.m., and indeed, at 2:53 a.m., the footage shows him leaving the club alone. He walks calmly across the parking lot, steps onto the sidewalk, and heads home. This validated his account and cleared him of suspicion. The investigators then turned to the same footage to track Adrianne's departure and see if she was alone. At 1:38 a.m., the camera captured her leaving the club by herself, but only moments later, another man followed her out. The man in the footage matched the description Jay had given. The cap worn by their new acquaintance was a key detail that ultimately identified him. The footage shows the African-American man running after Adrianne to return a jacket she had forgotten at the club. She stopped, exchanged a few words with him, and then they both walked towards her home. It's reasonable to assume that the man might have offered to walk her home, and she probably couldn't turn him down, even if she wanted to. After reviewing this, the police turned their attention back to the CarMax video footage. Comparing the footage from the dealership's parking lot with that of the strip club confirmed they were looking at two completely different people. Detectives came to believe that the true culprit had left Adrianne's stolen car in the dealership lot, then headed off in the opposite direction, steering clear of the security cameras. We went to pick up Adrianne's things, which was very difficult to do, to walk in there and see all her personal items. She had everything all ready to go. She knew that they were going to have their first night at the condo together. I mean, she even had a pretty little thing that she was going to wear for him. Coming to terms with the heartbreaking loss of their daughter, Adrianne's parents arrived to gather her belongings. The task was especially painful, knowing she had been eagerly preparing for a new chapter with her partner in their new home. Following a detailed forensic analysis, Adrianne's car was also returned to them. In the meantime, The forensic lab had completed its analysis of the sheets and mattress from the victim's bedroom. The results showed that the perpetrator's DNA was found all over, including on the victim's body. However, a search through the database didn't yield any matches. With this in mind, the police decided to reconstruct the suspect's movements that night. Detectives revisited the footage from the Diamond Dolls Club, but it didn't provide any useful leads. They considered the possibility that if the camera hadn't captured him at night, he might have been there much earlier. Finally, at 5:42 p.m., the same African-American man appeared on screen, and this time, the police were able to capture a clear image of his face. The next step was to figure out how the suspect had gotten to the club. He used an uncommon mode of transportation for this area. He took a taxi. To see somebody arrive in a taxi was unusual in a town like this. Everybody had their own car. Taxis weren't used as frequently as they were in New York. In a town where almost everyone had their own car, taxis weren't often needed, which actually worked in the police's favor. They realized that, from this point on, identifying him would just be a matter of time. The authorities quickly obtained the passenger's phone number from the taxi service, which turned out to be registered to Thomas Frederick. A comparison of his driver's license photo with the surveillance footage from the club confirmed it was the same man. Since there was no DNA match in the police database and no solid evidence linking him to the crime, the authorities put Thomas Frederick under round-the-clock surveillance in an attempt to collect a saliva sample. The detectives had to be very careful to avoid tipping him off, as they couldn't risk him fleeing once he sensed something was wrong. Patience was key as they waited for the right opportunity. Eventually, their persistence paid off when they managed to recover a cigarette butt that Frederick had tossed on the ground. The long-awaited moment had finally come. The evidence was quickly sent to the lab to compare the DNA with the samples found at Adrianne's house. At that point, everyone had one fear. The criminal could flee the state at any moment, escaping justice before the police could secure an arrest warrant. Fortunately, the lab results came back much sooner than expected. For the first 40 minutes of the interrogation, Frederick remained calm, discussing his contacts, friends, and trips to various clubs. However, when the police showed him a picture of Adrianne Robert, his behavior changed. "Tell us about your interaction with this girl, the one in the picture we showed you." "She bought me drinks. We danced at the club, met a friend, had some more drinks, and then went to work." "So you left that place and then ended up going to work after being out all night? You went to work after that?" "I do that all the time." "Okay, I'm just asking." "So you see her at the club. There's some interaction. She buys you drinks, and then you leave. Did you stay there until Diamond Dolls closed? When Diamond Dolls closed, or I probably left before, depending on if I needed cigarettes or not. It all depends." The suspect claimed that after he and Adrianne left the club, they went their separate ways, but the video evidence contradicted this. "That's all I recollect from that night, and it's surprising that you showed me that. It just flashed me doing that. But you do remember walking her to the corner? When I realized I had her sweater, I saw that in the video." "Yeah. Right. Absolutely. That's the only reason why I got up. Because of this. Otherwise, I'd still have been sitting there." "Right. I understand that. Have you ever been to her house?" "If I did or didn't, I really don't remember. I told you. When I drink just so that I was clear. She went one direction, you went another." "Yeah. You never caught her again?" "I have not seen her since that night. Since she split at that intersection. I have not seen her since that night. Period." Realizing the police weren't going to let him off the hook that easily, he began to change some of his earlier statements. The police weren't surprised by his attempt to manipulate the story. He knew there was no way he could completely avoid responsibility in the eyes of the law. Ultimately, the detectives obtained the key testimony, and the suspect was officially charged with the murder of the young woman. In January 2014, Thomas Frederick stood trial. During the hearing, the prosecution presented their version of the events from that night. Adrianne and her neighbor arrived at the club together and sat at the same table. After a while, Jay left, giving Frederick the chance to try to get closer to Adrianne. However, after some time, Adrianne decided to leave and head home to prepare for her move the next day. But the predator wasn't willing to let his victim go that easily. At one point, the girl became uncomfortable with the stranger's company and tried to escape. Unfortunately, she couldn't get away. The man followed her all the way to her home, where she locked herself in her room, hoping he wouldn't be able to reach her. But the criminal wasn't going to leave without getting what he wanted. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen, went upstairs, and used it to break into her bedroom. The injuries on her body clearly showed that he had forced her into an intimate act. Afterward, he forced her into the bathroom, where he finished what he had started. Frederick clearly attempted to cover his tracks by cutting a piece of the bedsheet where his DNA might have been left behind. He then took Adrianne's car keys, drove a few blocks, and left the car in the first parking lot he came across. Thomas Frederick was sentenced to life without parole in Florida. That means he will spend the rest of his life in prison and will never get out. While Adrianne's family is relieved that her killer was caught, it doesn't bring their loved one back. The only small comfort they have is knowing that the man who did this to their daughter will never be able to harm anyone. Sadly, all that remains for the mother are video recordings of her beloved daughter's voice, full of her vibrant, infectious energy. The young woman had only wanted to enjoy a night out with her friend. It could have been just another ordinary evening, if only a psychopath hadn't chosen her as his victim.